Greetings, people. I'm partially inspired to do this live stream because tonight I met yet another friendly individual who came up to me and said that he enjoyed my live streams. Most of these people I encounter tend to be at Tulsa events where I've been going frequently across New Hampshire now for 2 weeks plus. So almost longer than I expected to be doing it, but you know what? Now's the time, I guess. So why not? I'll get into the headline of this stream shortly, but actually, let me just do it now. Bernie did a live stream on YouTube last night that you can go look up. It's on his official channel. And he's basically discussing the impeachment trial, which formally began yesterday when John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, waltzed into the Senate chamber and collected an oath from the senators that they will be impartial jurors of this trial, which everybody knows is a total joke. All but, I would say, maybe 10 at the most senators have decided well ahead of time which way they are going to vote on this trial, and they are doing so largely not as a reaction to the facts at hand, but because of their own partisan interests, which is understandable given that the Senate is a partisan institution. But it kind of does make a mockery of this whole idea that they're going to just objectively sit there and adjudicate the details of the case of Trump's impeachment. Now, maybe I'll be surprised, and there are more people than I think that actually try to exercise some semblance of independent thought, but I doubt it. So Bernie did this live stream last night, and if you watch it, what he does is essentially just recite all the standard Democratic Party talking points on impeachment. And that seems to be like something of a misfire on his part, although he's been doing it for months. Because part of what makes Bernie appealing, I thought, was that he does not adhere to all the standard Democratic Party talking points on any given issue. But this is a set of issues where his rhetoric does almost perfectly mirror what you'd see if you just switched on MSNBC on any given day and watched what the random Democratic pundit is saying on the impeachment topic. Remember, Bernie endorsed impeachment of Trump way back in June. Was it June? Yeah, it was June, solely on the ground of the Mueller investigation. So that was before this whole Ukraine issue was a glimmer in anyone's eye. Now, the Ukraine stuff is an offshoot of Russiagate, but it's telling that Bernie was willing to endorse impeachment well before the Ukraine thing erupted. And when I say it's an offshoot, I mean that Ukraine, and I've talked about this before, but the whole Ukraine episode that led to the impeachment has to be understood as another iteration of Russiagate. It's the same thematic construction of Russiagate. It's just the culmination to give it more juice. And when Ukraine Gate, if you want to call it that, came down the pike, they saw their opportunity and seized it. But half of the Democratic caucus, before Trump ever made his infamous phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, had already endorsed an impeachment process, which means that they had effectively already endorsed impeachment, because why would you back an impeachment inquiry if you weren't also intending on voting in favor of impeachment articles that would stem from that inquiry? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because then you're then you would be saying essentially, oh, yeah, so we endorsed this impeachment inquiry and we've devoted several months, if not more, of our attentional and political resources to carrying out this inquiry. But, it turns out that Trump didn't do anything wrong, so forget about it. Yeah, right. No, it was preordained. And, Bernie hopped on the bandwagon. Recall that Elizabeth Warren really first started gaining in the polls to a significant degree shortly after she became the standard bearer within the Democratic Party on forcefully advocating for impeachment. You should go back and check. I covered it at the time, wrote about it at the time. Warren galvanized the faction of the Democratic Party who were desperate for impeachment. And that really buoyed her in the early summer, in the late spring, early summer, when she first started to gain national traction. And that was a crucial part of her overall electoral strategy and got her to where she is now, where I don't know if she's a favorite to win Iowa, New Hampshire, or any of the early states, but she's at least in contention, whereas many, many, many other Democratic candidates have been terminated. So if you go watch that live stream, if you are, generally a Bernie supporter, which I consider myself in a way, in that I voted for him in 2016, I broadly support his political project. But if you watch him reciting these talking points, it is almost bizarre in a way because it's antithetical to much of what his purported political project is. If you fail to recognize the hawkish, conspiratorial, militaristic, and largely wrong premises which guided this entire impeachment process from the outset, then it seems to me that you are failing to exercise your faculties of discernment in a way that would befit somebody like Bernie, whose political project overall, I believe, is honorable. Because the assumptions that have now been baked into the very fabric of American governance forevermore, because whether or not Trump is convicted or acquitted, and he'll almost certainly be acquitted, the act of impeachment, again, embeds the logic of the impeachment articles into the broader logic of American governmental structures. So there's only been 3 impeachments in U.S. history, and they set a precedent. So now we have a brand new precedent, which says, for example, that national security state bureaucrats have the authority to override the elected president in terms of their foreign policy priorities. And if the elected president cuts against those priorities, they take it upon themselves to seek retribution. That is a core precept of the impeachment articles. And Tulsi, for instance, just yesterday, talked about the danger of that, the danger of overlooking this extremely grave implication of the entire impeachment saga. And if you haven't seen it, I uploaded a video earlier today of her discussing that at her event on the 16th of January in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's crucial. And there are many other aspects of this impeachment stuff which are immensely troubling. And for Bernie to simply go ahead and just rehash the same sort of crap that you'd hear from a Chuck Schumer or an Adam Schiff or even a Pelosi, it's just like, I don't know if that's the greatest move. Now, I can see the argument for it in that Bernie needs to appeal to normie Democrats in this phase of the primary. Like, he's obviously got his base sewed up, so that's not an issue. It's about expanding that coalition and garnering the support of people who might not be like ideological socialists, right, or Bernie or busters or those types of people. So you have to do things that make overtures to people who are just sort of standard fare Democrats and are maybe very immersed in this impeachment stuff. But there's a higher principle at stake, I would think, in that Bernie himself could be impeded as president by much of the logic that has been set forth in these articles. So if Bernie tries to do something that is conflicting with so-called U.S. foreign policy, official U.S. foreign policy, then because of the precedent established by this impeachment, whatever national security state holdovers remain in the Bernie administration could have a justification for attempting to thwart him. And so there we go. Don't say I didn't warn you. And of course, I mean, fundamental to these impeachment articles is a whole set of just nonsensical, overblown, hyperbolic, new Cold War assumptions that got largely ignored as this impeachment process went forward because the Democrats didn't want to care about it. If anything, they just wanted to use that Cold War rhetoric as leverage because it circumstantially, in their mind, disadvantaged Trump. And of course, Republicans didn't want to talk about it either because they don't really care about, they don't have a principled opposition to fomenting a new Cold War. They, for the most part, like it. And they were bragging that Trump was actually super aggressive to Russia, which he largely has been. And so there's been nobody in the entire political scene, really, who's been able to articulate a third way or a different perspective on the basic meaning of this core theme of the Trump presidency, from Russiagate to Ukrainegate. Again, it's all part of the same continuum. And really the only one who's had any degree of foresight or discernment on this issue is Tulsi. So that, I think, ought to explain why I've dedicated a great deal of my attention over the course of this campaign to her, because I just think it's so crucial that we at least have somebody who can apply a modicum of rationality to this set of issues, because it's going to come back to bite us. I'm saying, using the royal we there, but it's the consequences of this hysterical overreaction and overreach, which again culminated in the impeachment. It's not going to end with Trump, right? It's going to reverberate for years, if not decades or centuries. That's how consequential it is. Many of these precepts were ratified in the form of the impeachment articles. So now we have a playbook that will enable people who maybe have a different partisan motive down the line, but now have the tools available to them to supersede and buck any president who they feel that has got strayed too far from the acceptable foreign policy consensus. And that is dangerous. So some of the stuff that Bernie said is just, I mean, come on. He said, quote, "As we all know, there is significant evidence that President Trump committed obstruction of justice with regard to the Robert Mueller investigation by firing the FBI director, James Comey. Come on. That's Bernie saying there that, yeah, he supports all this impeachment stuff, but there's other stuff that may have been included in the impeachment, such as Trump taking down Robert Mueller, or taking down, sorry, Comey. And it's just like, I know that it was fashionable at the time to say that that was an impeachable offense, but Trump has the prerogative to fire executive branch officials at will, even if it's for a corrupt motive. And I think it's even questionable that his motive in firing Comey was necessarily corrupt. Comey is kind of a mess, and he mishandled innumerable aspects of the Russia investigation. He leaked. He's turned himself into this kind of like Democrat warrior. And remember, before Trump even took office, Comey pulled the J. Edgar Hoover move and met him in Trump Tower and said, "Hey, Donald, we've got this dossier which says that you had a a sex party with prostitutes in Moscow, and it's on tape." One of the most ridiculous. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover would blush at that. So, I mean, we don't have to rehearse the entire Comey, melodrama, but there were definitely legitimate grounds to fire Comey. And why even bring that up again? Why would Bernie in January of 2020, with 3 weeks to go before the Iowa caucus, be talking about how terrible it was that Trump fired James Comey in May of 2017? I'm not going to get in his head. I think there are certain, again, partisan incentives to just get fully on board with this narrative. But maybe Bernie does on some level believe it, which would be even more unfortunate, because I would hope he would have people with a little more insight into the intricacies of how this narrative has been wielded for nefarious purposes. And even if you dislike Trump, even if you want to vote it out of office, and I have certainly said that I do not favor Trump being reelected, that all notwithstanding, it doesn't justify the just totally insane security state tactics that have been marshaled against Trump from the outset. Disliking Trump doesn't mean you therefore have to like the FBI and the CIA interfering in U.S. politics to an unprecedented degree. Remember, Andrew McCabe, the former FBI deputy director, launched a secondary counterintelligence investigation into Trump in 2017 after the Comey firing, and stated as rationale for this counterintelligence investigation that Trump could be a threat to America because he departed from certain foreign policy presuppositions in terms of how American foreign policy typically operates. Now, he said that the idea was that he was doing this with respect to Russia, but it could easily be down the line with respect to, I don't know, Iran, China. You go down the list. That's not a logic that I think it's reasonable to endorse in any form. Trump also says, Bernie also says, "I am very alarmed by new reports that Russia recently hacked into the Ukrainian gas company at the very center of the impeachment trial, as well as Russia's plans to once again meddle in our elections and in our democracy." Okay, number one. Are we just going now with reports about alleged hacking? Haven't we learned a lesson there? Shouldn't we wait for some independent corroboration to draw any conclusions about the nature of that alleged hacking? Come on. And then Russia's plans to once again meddle in our elections. What plans? Does Putin have some kind of manifesto hidden in a basement underneath the Kremlin somewhere where it says like plan in big red bold letters? What, you mean they're gonna maybe buy some Facebook ads again? Spend like $20,000 on some ridiculous Facebook ads and spread some memes? That's what we're gonna get worked into a frenzy about again? And the word metal has always been a weasel word. Metal? Buying Facebook ads and having some Twitter trolls is meddling? If that's meddling, then man, the term metal has really been diminished of any consequential meaning. Bernie says Russia, as almost every U.S. intelligence agency has agreed, interfered with the U.S. presidential election in 2016, yet Donald Trump still denies that reality. Oh my goodness. That's the worst thing that Donald Trump could ever do, is to deny the conclusions of the U.S. intelligence agencies. How dare he? It's not as though the U.S. intelligence agencies have overreached to an extraordinary degree over the course of this Russiagate fiasco. It's not as if they've given us every reason in the world to question the veracity of their proclamations. No, it's mandated that the president dutifully parrot everything that the U.S. intelligence agencies say. So I'm assuming Bernie is just a half step away from voraciously lamenting that that Trump stood on the stage with Putin in Helsinki in July of 2018 and believed him over our vaunted intelligence agencies. Bernie says also that it's so terrible that Trump and Republicans are trying to promote what he calls a bogus Russian conspiracy theory that Ukraine tried to influence the 2016 election. Well, they did. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's been reported on by many reputable outlets. I mean, we've been over all this stuff before. I almost feel bored by it, but sadly, Bernie gives these talking points a little bit more credence with a certain crowd of progressives who, will not assess these claims with any degree of critical scrutiny. So, the basic point I think here is, if I could send a telegram. Sorry, it's late. Telegram to Bernard, I would say, Rachel Maddow is not going to endorse you, Bernard. Why bother with any of this stuff? What else? So, today I was with Tulsia. She was just making the rounds in Merrimack, New Hampshire. She stopped into a diner, and I had a wonderful lunch in that diner, and got to talking with some of the staff there. And there was a guy named Kyle who said, "You know what? I was just working another job." He was working at another diner that's owned by the same guy, and he was the cook. He said he was working at this other diner establishment a couple of days ago, and this other candidate was a huge dick to him, because he went up to him and asked if he could take a picture with him. Just as is now totally commonplace. I mean, the obsession with selfies is just it's a little much, I have to say. I'm not saying that I'm totally immune to it, but it's just constant everywhere. People even sometimes want selfies with me. If you want a selfie with me, I mean, maybe you need to reevaluate your entire approach to selfies. But that said, I will take them with anyone who requests happily. Um, but this guy Kyle told me that he made breakfast for this other candidate, and he didn't remember who it was. He said it was like a guy with short black hair. So I figured he was talking about Mayor Pete. So I pulled up a picture of Mayor Pete and asked, was it him? Like, yeah, it's him. And the guy didn't even know who he was. Just a guy, just a cook, not a political devotee. And so I was like, wait, you went up to him. So you served him food. You made him eggs, toast, and a crepe. Am I pronouncing that right? CREPE? I always forget. And I went, and he said, yeah. And I went up to him and just asked for a photo. And he was like, Pete said back to him, no, I don't do that. What? So I asked Kyle, was he in a rush? I mean, was there some issue where he couldn't take 2 seconds and take a photo with you? And Kyle was like, no, he was just sitting there, just socializing with the people at the table, just chatting. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't going anywhere. I'm like, really? Huh. And so I'm going to show you the guy here. Maybe he'll watch this at some point. There's Kyle. And then sure enough, Tulsi took a nice photo with him. And Kyle also relayed the story to Tulsi, and she reacted in a very amusing way, which I won't reveal. But if you know, if you can recall Tulsi's past exchange with Mayor Pete on the debate stage, maybe that gives you a little bit of insight into how she feels about Pete. And this I think this story reinforced her view. But it's not just a trivial story, because I think it really does say a lot about the person when they're just needlessly mean to service workers. Like, you're better than them, or you can't take 2 seconds to take a photo with them. I think that says something about your character. In a not particularly agreeable way. So it's funny because I tweeted out this little anecdote, and I got like, it's so weird on Twitter, because like people always just assume that you're making stuff up or lying. I mean, you can say what you want about me, but I'll take every criticism under the sun, but I don't consciously lie about stuff. I have never consciously lied about anything that I put out into any public forum. I like to think that I always abide by a basic code of ethics where lying consciously is just beyond anything that I would do. So no, it's not a lie. You can go find this guy at the diner if you really want and verify the story. He said he's fine with it. But I did think it was funny that he described Pete as an asshole. And the guy, Kyle, later told me that I asked him, like, do you vote? And he's just like, nah. I just never really had anybody that I wanted to vote for, but I guess I'll vote for her. So he's going to vote for Tulsi, accordingly. That's what he said. But I don't know if he's registered to vote or not. Irregular voters aren't always up to date on their registration and that kind of thing. And then there was another event from Tulsi tonight, also in Merrimack. It was funny. So at this event, it was in high school, right? And there was a girls' basketball game going on. So I watched some of the basketball game. Girl nailed an outside jumper, which is cool. And I went to the event, and I guess at halftime, so the while Tulsi's event was going on while there was a halftime show in this basketball game, right? And during the halftime show, that stupid, incredibly irritating song "High High Hopes" started playing. You know, the Pete theme song. I don't even remember who sings the song. Gotta have high high hopes for a living. You know that song? And you could hear it emanating into the room that Tulsi was in. That's the theme song of Pete. So there are these ridiculous videos where you could find Pete volunteers playing the song High High Hopes for a living, and they have their own dance to it. I don't know if you've seen those videos, but go look them up. I mean, it's all like these middle-aged white people dancing incredibly awkwardly to the High High Hopes song. So I was sitting there in Tulsi's event, hearing the High High Hopes song in the background and thinking to myself, oh God, Pete has infiltrated this event indirectly, which he did. But the one notable answer, the one notable comment, and the most notable comment to me that Tulsi gave at the event was she was asked about drug prohibition. And the way that the girl who asked it phrased the question, I thought was really good. Because prior to that, Tulsi had been talking about foreign policy, and the girl said, I want to ask you about another war, and that's the war on drugs. Do you think it's too extreme to consider full-scale legalization of all drugs to end drug prohibition? And right now, and Tulsi has